arms work just as hard as our legs. Fire up your triceps.
Your hips are dipping, always the option to come down to the knee.
Not as a weakness, but as a sense of strength, something that's empowering.
Namaste.
Hey patrons, so I have a video for you today with what I'm calling handstand essentials. We're not actually going to do handstand today, but these are 4 poses or exercises that I feel like have made a huge difference in my handstand practice. Those of you who have known me for a while, either as a teacher or a yoga student, know that handstand has been a huge struggle for most of my practice for a lot of reasons, physical and mental. So now that I am doing handstand somewhat successfully, a lot of people, especially who have followed me on social media for a long time and have seen the progress that I've made, have asked how I got there. So these are the 4 poses that I really practice a lot that are not handstand. I mean, you can sit there every single day and kick up into handstand against the wall over and over and over, and I'm sure you get to handstand too. But these are poses that built my core strength enough and built the strength in my arms, my shoulders, and worked on my sense of balance to where handstand, when I did try it and did practice it, was much more accessible. So finding those other opportunities to help build your practice outside of just focusing on that one pose. So anyway, that's my soapbox today. Pose number 1, boat pose. So boat is fantastic pose to help build your core strength. So for boat, we start sitting on our booty. Remove any extra love out from underneath you might need to, so you're nice and firm on your sit bones. Grab behind your thighs, lift your chest up until you feel your core engage, and then start to lean back. So this may be as far as we go. That's great. We're working on building core strength. That's the idea. We might be able to lift the feet up off the ground. Also great. Maybe eventually the arms come out. Maybe we start to straighten the legs. Once we get focused on holding our boat here, make sure that our shoulders and our back don't start to concave and round. If that starts happening, we've gone too far. We need to go back a level, either grabbing onto the thighs or finding some way to modify. If we start feeling pretty confident in our boat, I did a whole separate video on boat drills, which you can go check out, but there's other ways to improve your core and your balance using your boat. So if we can grab on to our big toes and roll our shoulders down and back, we start to get very into balance and core at the same time. You can bring the shins in even closer, obviously balancing more and more and more on your tailbone. We can do lowering the legs down, bringing the knees into the chest, extending the legs back up. You can do low boats. You can do all kinds of things to help build your core strength and your balance from boat pose. So it's one of my favorites. That's why I like to teach it, and it really will help, especially those low belly muscles that you'll need for handstand eventually. Next one up is crow pose. I like to call it the gateway inversion because once you get comfortable on your hands in crow, it opens up a whole new world to you, including handstand at some point. So for crow pose, again, I have a whole nother tutorial just on crow, but fingers spread wide. We plant our hands down on the mat about shoulder width distance apart. You bend your elbows a little bit so that your legs can come up on your triceps. I get asked a lot, how far should my knees go up my arms? Well, it depends on how far they can go up your arms. So ideally, the higher away from your elbows, the more towards your armpits, the better. But we may not be starting there, and that's okay. We're working on it. It's practice, right? So looking forward, if we watch the toes, we end up in a somersault, so look ahead. And then play with lifting your hips. Don't think about like just kicking your feet up off of the ground, because again, that's somersault territory. So lifting your hips using those low belly muscles that you use in your boat, maybe lifting the feet. If we're a little bit hesitant, we take a block or a stack of books, whatever we have. We stand on it, and then we use those same muscles. We get to feel that same sensation without having to leave the floor. Another great thing about crow is it gives you the opportunity to practice balancing on your hands. So the thing about balancing on your hands, you want to have the weight more in your fingertips, less in your wrists. So if you're leaning into your wrists the whole time, using your wrists to help support you, you're going to fatigue really quickly. You're not going to be able to hold your crow for long, and you won't be able to hold handstand for long either. So if you think about having your hands on the ground, almost lifting these second knuckles slightly up away from the ground. So sometimes I say that and then I see people like this. That's way more than slightly, okay? So just like barely little bend, little lift. Then once you start doing bigger inversions, like handstand, it becomes a lot easier to control the weight in your hands and your wrists aren't having to hold you up as much. So that's crow pose. Same kind of thing is Lalasana variations. So the one that I like to teach a lot, you may want a couple blocks for this. So if you have blocks, I suggest having two handy if you're not quite sure where you stand on these. You're gonna cross your knees, or your shins rather, in front of you, knees in towards your chest. Now there's lots of variations you can try, but this is kind of a good introductory one. You're gonna have your hands almost like between where your foot and your hips are. When I first started trying to do this pose, I had my hands like way back by my hips, and I just couldn't understand. I was like, why can I not lift my butt off the ground? Why can I not lift my butt off the ground? And it was because my hands were too far back. So if you have your hands maybe a little further forward than you think they're supposed to be, you lean into your hands. Again, weight more in the fingers than in the wrists. Lift your butt up. Practice doing that. If we can't quite get the butt off the ground, that's when we use the blocks. So same idea, hands on the blocks makes it much easier to lift up. You're using those low belly muscles, again, like we talked about. Also practicing challenging your hand, your upper body strength. If you want a little more challenge, you can also lift up. Maybe we lift one foot off the ground. Maybe eventually we lift both feet off the ground, okay? So those are all variations you can play with, building the arm strength, building the belly strength. Awesome, awesome, awesome for working towards handstand. Last but not least, jumping to the top of your mat from down dog. So if you do a vinyasa practice, and you're doing a lot of transitioning from the back of your mat to the top of your mat, then use that opportunity to use those same low belly muscles to find a little bit of float in your practice. So what I mean, from your down dog, bending your knees, send your tail up and back, hug your low belly in and up, look towards your hands where you want to land, and then spring to the top of your mat. So think about going up first and then forward, like you're trying to get your hips over your shoulders. What it doesn't look like is this, okay? So you're not just trying to get your feet from point A to point B. You're really trying to find some hang time. And a good indicator I like to use is how softly your feet can land on the floor. So if you can land without a lot of noise, you know that you're using those low belly muscles. You're really finding a little bit of lowering control, muscle control on the lower down. You're not just, boom, launching your way to the top of your mat. So those are my 4 poses that I have focused on a lot this last year to help build my core strength, my balance, my wrist and hand strength, where I control the weight in my hands, all of those things that have helped work me up to a better handstand practice. And I still have a long way to go. And that's the thing that I also want to make clear is like, you're never really done with a pose. There's always something more challenging. There's always a different variation. It's not about just getting here and then we're done forever, okay? So your practice is always growing, always changing, and take that as something awesome and exciting and not something that's defeating or frustrating. So I hope that those help. If you're practicing those consistently, I do feel like your handstand is gonna improve. If you have other questions or other requests, I would love to hear them. Please drop me a note. Otherwise, enjoy your practice, have fun, and namaste.